If you're a parent, especially a new parent, then you intimately know what it can feel like to feel overwhelmed and like you don't have any time for yourself. In today's conversation, we talk about some practical ways that you can stop feeling so guilty about taking time for self-care and how you can reach out to build a community to help you get more done. Today, I'm speaking with Catherine O'Brien. Catherine is a licensed marriage and family therapist and also the founder of happywithbaby.com. She currently lives in Sacramento, California, and enjoys paddleboarding and rowing with her husband and her two children. Let's dive into today's conversation. Catherine, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
So excited to have you. I love that you have this platform called happywithbaby.com. What was it that led you to really want to focus on parenting and on this aspect of it? Because your background is in marriage and family therapy, right?
Right. Yeah. So I was a marriage and family therapist when we had our first child. And that's what made me want to go into this area, because I was like, what the heck just happened here? I was so I was so unprepared, for what was to happen. And my husband and I were recently married. We had been together for, almost 5 years when we got married, but, we celebrated our first anniversary with a 3-week-old. And,
Wow.
I just had we had this great relationship, we're a bit older parents, we knew, confident, we can handle anything, right? Until you are exhausted and, the sleepless nights and worrying and, pressure, different pressure and trying to figure things out. And I had no experience with babies, and they just send you home with a baby. And they don't ask you, do you know what you're doing? Because I didn't know what I was doing. And so it's that's a lot of new stuff. And so, it took a toll on our relationship. And I just realized it's not just taking a toll on my relationship. I'm looking around at other moms when I'm going to these mom groups and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, it's taking a toll on them too. But where was this conversation? I felt like nobody prepared us. It was all the preparation for childbirth, having a baby. But no, what do you do now that you have the baby? And so I felt I wish I would have known some things. And so that's kind of where it all started.
That's awesome.
My failures was let me help others.
Absolutely. I mean, that's where some of the best solutions come from, right? It's actually, I believe, even research based that the first crisis, so to say, that a couple will come across is the birth of their first child, because all of a sudden the main focus in the marriage stops being the other person, and it starts becoming this baby or this child. So my husband and I, we became parents. And my listeners, most of them know this, but we went from a family of 2, like he and I, to a family of 4 overnight. Because we adopted. So we had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old that we picked up at an orphanage at 10 a.m. on February 6th in 2019. And from that moment forward, we were parents of toddlers. Yeah. So it was a very different experience, considering we didn't have the sleepless nights and the potty training and all of those things, but it was definitely a change in our normal routine and how we connected with each other.
Right.
What are some of the areas that you've seen, either personally or also with the moms, the clients that you've worked with, in how their relationships, specifically marriage, what ways are their marriages really affected when kids start coming into the mix?
Well, I mean, I think you said it, right? Here we're focusing on each other, and now there's distraction, right? And things that were easy to do, or it was easy to find time. After work, let's have dinner, or let's go, do something.
Yeah.
And now it's oh, wait, we've got to pick up the kids from daycare, or, get bedtime, or, those things. And so just the struggle of how are they, the things they can't do things as easily on their own, or they have to negotiate, hey, I have this thing, can you cover me or whatever, and so just, there's a lot more negotiating that there wasn't previous. And I think that can be difficult. because they're having to communicate in a way that they probably didn't have to previously, as
Mhm.
readily. And so I think that can be difficult, and that is often a challenge of like, okay, how do we do this? Like, what are your expectations? What are my expectations? And how are we going to work together to, meet them or not meet them? And then what are we going to do about that?
Absolutely. And don't you think that just the change in the ordinary routine, the
Mm-hmm.
sleepless nights, that lack
Yeah.
of sleep, it just brings an extra set of emotion and stress
Yeah.
and frustration that wasn't there before, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I hear this too, like the I'm tired of doing the same thing. Like that like Groundhog Day. Like this is, we
Mhm.
get up and we get ready and, we go to work, go to daycare, whatever it is, then we come home and we do, and it's like, I'm just like tired of that and like wanting like something, you know, something a little different, like in the routine. And so that can get boring or, and then on the
Yeah.
weekends, we're doing laundry and we're cleaning house and we're getting ready for the week again. And so that is
Yeah.
also hard.
Yeah. One of the things that you talk about is ways that parents, probably especially moms, can prioritize self care, especially when they're overwhelmed. What are the ways that parents can do this?
Yeah, because I think sometimes we're say self care and we're like, oh, we're going to go and do these things. And it's like, I don't have time to go and make appointments to, I like to, get my hair done or, go for a massage or something. And that's not always realistic, but it's like, it's about making those small moments, is like finding those small pockets. Like what do I need to do to make sure that I'm filling my cup? Like I'm an introvert, right? And I think it's hard to be an introvert and be a parent at the same time because you're constantly, there's demands on your
Mm,
attention and yourself. And so it's like, I need, like, ideally, like I need a lot of downtime. And it's hard. And
mm,
I don't have that. I mean, more now that my kids are older, but definitely when they were little, I didn't have that. So it's like, where do I find those small moments where it's like, I can take 5 minutes, and lay on my bed while they're taking a nap or, read a book or doing something, that fills me up, like making sure that like I'm stretching or, doing things that, am I drinking my water? Like those little things, like what are the little self-care things for you that you're making sure that you're taking care of yourself and not just the big things. But then for the bigger things, right? That you are communicating with your partner or, support system to make sure that you can get those too, because we also need those as well.
mm. What do you think prohibits people from asking for help from their support system or from their spouse? What is it that is stopping them?
I I think guilt. I think feeling like maybe we should be able to do it, like other people can do it. Like I'm their mom, like what, I'm their parent. Um, I think fears that people will say no and will be
Mhm.
disappointed. Uh, yeah, I think a lot of different things can get in the way of asking for help or just like not ever learning that it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
like, oftentimes, I'll talk to my clients and they're, they're like, well, my mom did it. Like she didn't have help. She did everything, but it definitely was a different time too. And I think the parents, at least my generation, right? Like my mom wasn't setting up play dates and all these different activity, like the things that parents do today for their kids. Like we spend more time with our children now than previous generations. I
I
mean,
haven't
I
even.
remember just being out running around the yard for hours at a
Yes.
time. Like
That's what I
I
remember too.
wasn't like being watched, where
Right.
we are like with our kids the whole time,
Yeah, that's a
typically.
really interesting point
Yeah,
because it's so true. I mean, not when I was super young, but probably when I turned
sure.
7 or 8, I'd get on my bike and ride to my best friend's house who lived in the
Yeah,
same neighborhood and
yeah.
would just call my parents maybe when I got there. I think they just trusted it was safe. And it's so true now. Like my daughter has a best friend that lives, I don't even know where she lives, but I know she lives in the same neighborhood because we haven't been to to their house because there's no way Eliana, my daughter, is going to walk there on her own, right?
Yeah.
I would never. So you're right. That's an aspect of it I haven't really thought about. We do tend to be around our kids more. And part of that's because, is it safe? Like we see more, whether it's more happening more now or not. We see way more about kids being abducted and all of this stuff. So clearly we want to protect them from that.
Right.
That's an interesting point I hadn't thought of before. Yeah, we are with our kids a lot. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but
totally not a bad thing. But I think it's like, so I think my mom had a lot more downtime than I, or to get things done. Like she could, I mean, granted, we had chores and stuff like that too. But like, I remember her being on the phone, and that was back when there was this cord, right? And she would just be on the phone with this long cord, like walking through the kitchen and doing stuff like for hours. I felt like she was. I don't know if that's true, but it seemed like it.
Yes, I agree. I also remember my mom would watch soap operas while doing her housework throughout the day. Like she would just have her laundry or the ironing and she'd be watching that and I'd be doing whatever, I don't know, playing up in my room. But that's a really great point. How can moms get over some of that guilt of asking? What are some tips that you have of even how do you word it? How do you begin to reach out to people? And even if they say no, how do you keep that from really hurting you so that you stop asking for help in the future, so that you won't stop asking for help?
I think it's like going to the people that ask you for help. Because if you think about it, there's people that are asking you, right? And so like turn it back to them, or say, like if you have a friend or family member, it's like, hey, can you help me with this? And, like I'll help you with that. Like I've had, friends, I've had clients where it's like, oh, we alternate, every other week, like who's watching our kids for the night, or like maybe during the day so we can run errands, like finding something. And I think it's like starting small too. Like we don't have to have these big, huge asks. I think sometimes smarting, especially if we're not used to asking for help, like I think it's good to start with like a small request, with somebody that like, feels good or like has offered, like listen.
Yeah.
I think it's important to listen to the offers because they come in, and I think we can oftentimes just like dismiss them. Oh, I got it. But people will often offer support or like help in some way. And it's like, listen for that. And then, be like, okay, yeah, like I have a couple of things I need to do and I'm just trying to figure out, and maybe like let them offer what they're willing to do. Like, yeah, I need, whatever it is. Maybe you have 2 or 3 things that you're trying to do, and see which one they're willing to help you with.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. What about when it comes to expressing to your spouse that you need to have some time for self-care? So not just needing help with certain things, but I need some time to break away, to have peace and quiet, to, get some relaxation and relief. What are some tips that you have on how you can approach that conversation?
Yeah. Well, I tell all the couples I work with, like, you both need that, right? So I say, you go into the conversation, like, I need time every week, right? Like maybe it's something big every week and then like the small things too. But it's like checking in with each other every week about what is something that you're going to do this week to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, something that like feels good. And like, how do we get that on the calendar? Because I think as parents, we have to calendar everything, or we forget, or it doesn't happen. Right. And so it's like putting it on the calendar, and maybe it's like, maybe you have something already set up where it's like on Saturday mornings, I get a couple hours. On Sunday mornings, you get a couple hours, and maybe you alternate or something like that, or every other week sort of thing. But it's like, I think it's ideal if you can have it be like a consistent thing. Like, hey, I know every Wednesday afternoon I get this, or I know every, Friday morning, whatever. And so then it's like, then I'm just deciding like what I'm doing. So I think it's going in and being like, hey, we both I know we both need some time for ourselves, and maybe your time for yourselves is hanging out with buddies, and maybe my time is, taking a nap or whatever. It doesn't matter. We all have different ways that we recharge, right? And so how do we make sure that we're both getting the time that we need to do that? And how do we support each other in doing that?
Yeah. One, so I hear you say is one way to do this could be creating a routine for yourself, kind of like we create it for our kids,
Mm-hmm.
and working with your spouse to
Yeah.
delineate what that routine can look like for both of
Yeah.
you. So where both
Yeah.
of you feel like you're getting the self-care aspects
Yeah.
that you need.
Yeah. So when I say like the self-care and then also the dates, like when are you making sure you're making those connection times? Whether it's a date outside of the home or a date like, hey, when the kids go down to bed, we turn off all devices and we play a game or we, do something that we like to do.
Yeah.
But it's like a
Yeah.
consistent basis. Like it needs to be consistent and regular.
Yeah. What about for the moms that are tired and overwhelmed and
Mm-hmm.
because of that are not necessarily wanting to have sex because they're tired
Mm-hmm.
and they're overwhelmed? What are some tips that you could give them to keep the romance and passion alive in their
Mm-hmm.
marriage?
Yeah, well, and I think it is because, like, oftentimes when the partner feels like, they're, rejected or that, not frustrated, right? And so I think it's like, yeah, I don't have the energy now, but like, let's sit, and maybe it's like I always say, turn off the devices so you can conversate, but maybe you're in that stage where it's like, I'm just tired. But like, so you sit down and watch a movie, but sit down on the couch together and maybe you hold hands, but sit close to each other, right? And don't be distracted by, I'm watching a movie and also have my phone in my hand,
Yeah.
scrolling, whatever, like maybe you're talking about the movie or you laugh, talk about the things you laugh about or the silly things that happen or whatever it is kind of movie that you're watching, but like do something together. And it doesn't have to be sex, but doing, energy wise, what you have the energy for to do.
Yeah. That's great. What about mindfulness and stress reduction techniques for when the overwhelmed parent can't seem to break out of the cycle of overwhelm? What tips do you have for that?
Yeah. um, well, I mean, of course, mindfulness and stress reduction techniques are super valuable for parents, right? And like, how do you do that in the chaos of parenting? So I mean, of course, I always recommend like taking those deep breaths, right? Because I know when I'm feeling overwhelmed or whatever, my kids react to my overwhelm. So it's like, how do I like take a step back and like, okay, take a few moments, focus on my breath, and I'll even do this in front of my kids so they like can see like how do I help calm my nervous system, right? And helping reduce those stress levels, right? And so like I think it's again making a little bit of time every day to do that. And as like I transition between from one, activity to another, it's like, okay, I'm going to take a few minutes and just like focus on, taking those deep breaths, being in the present moment, just like noticing like, how like checking in with like how I'm feeling, like how does my body feel and like what do I need right now? I think we can be so quick to like go from different things that we're not even like checking in with ourselves. So it's like finding like different times throughout the day. Like I'll even tell people like maybe the only time you sit down is when you go to the bathroom, but then check in with yourself. Like, how am I feeling? What do I need when I'm done with this? Right? Like, do I need to go get a drink of water? Do I need, what, and then finding like, what are some activities that bring you joy and relaxation? Maybe it's like putting on music and dancing around the house because the sound of, a song, helps change our mood, shift our mood. Right. And that movement feels good. Or maybe it's like, laying down and doing stretches as your kids crawl all over you, or like going out for a walk, or just even like going out and like standing in your grass if you have that, outside your house or whatever. But I think it's like finding things that like can be good. We know like, nature's good. We know listening to music is good for us, right? Like, so finding the different things that help, reduce that stress, and kind of help increase our overall well-being.
So
And
you
it's just
wrote
a few minutes. Yeah.
yeah. So you wrote a book about this called Happy with Baby, and it has a lot of great things in it. What is one of your favorite parts of that book that you included in it, and why did you want that part to be in it?
Well, this wasn't my original thing, but then it came into it. It's called I forget even what the chapter is, but it's about being a bat mom. And so my husband is totally into superheroes. Like he likes superheroes. I knew nothing about, like I knew Superman and Batman, but I didn't know DC versus Marvel or any of that until we had children. And now I know a lot of information that probably goes to waste too, but or takes up space in my brain for other things I should remember. But, there's always that concept of the super mom. And I don't like that concept because, I think it sets us up for failure. Like, what is a super mom? Like a mom that can do like everything. And I don't think we're meant to do everything. So, my Bat mom concept comes from the whole Batman idea in that he doesn't do it all himself, right? Like he's got gadgets. He's got people that help him out. Like he's a smart guy, but he's also resourceful and has other support systems. Now, granted, he has a lot of money too, but so that's helpful. But, if you go with the idea, like he's resourceful, he asks for help, he gets, support from people that know more about something than he does. Right. And he has, other tools that support him. Like he's not trying to do it all. And he's got his friends, right? He's got Superman, he's got Wonder Woman, he's got all, Robin. And so it's like, how do we access, how do we be the best Bat mom, right? How do we get the supports we need in place and not feel like we have to be the end all be all? Like, we can be the best parent we can be with good support systems in place.
He also has a robot butler.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. I love that. I love that perspective of it, of it's the team it's the saying, it takes a village, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It really does take a village. What about for people who they don't live near parents? That one boggles my mind. Thankfully,
yes,
it is huge. Thankfully, we live near both sets of parents, and they're a huge help and a huge support. But for the people who don't have that, what are some techniques that they could, or creative ways that they can think differently about getting a support system?
Yeah. So, I've been running like support groups for moms and parents for, 11 plus years now, basically based off of that because, when we first started out, only my brother lived close to us, and now we have like a lot more family that lives nearby, and it is more helpful. But in the area that I'm in, there's oftentimes where people move here for work or whatever, and they don't have any support. And it's really hard to parent with just you and your partner, right? Like, cause you need those date nights, you need help. And it's like, and it's difficult to be like, I always have to like pay if I want to get help. And so like, I encourage people, it's like, building your community, like, maybe joining a support group. I've had parents tell me they met, some of their best friends, like coming to my mom's group, cause then they would like connect after, and now, they'll babysit for each other and do different things like that, which is like, like, that warms my heart. That's like the goal. That's what my ultimate thing was. That's what I wanted for them. Right. Is to be able to help build their community. So it's like finding things that you like to do. Like there's, what are some of your hobbies you like to do? And maybe finding groups like that. Like I know some people like to hike, and there's like baby and me hiking groups, or, different things. And I know with COVID, like a lot of stuff like shut down, which was so difficult for new parents or for parents in general. Right. But now that things are opening up, like, I'm seeing more and more, opportunities. And so it's like how to find those things, or find the people that you connect with. And if you can't find it, create it, because let me tell you, there's people out there wanting it. And so like put it out on Meetup or it on a Facebook or whatever it is, and let people know that you're wanting to connect, because there is support out there, and we need connection. We need support. We need a village, let's be honest. And so it's like, yeah, finding ways to create it that way. Or like if you have, a church or schools, if your kids are in some kind of daycare, there's, oftentimes they have different ways to connect that way. So maybe, asking and reaching out there.
Yeah. So if you don't have the support system you need, one of the things I heard was take initiative to create one. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be this huge thing to start with.
Yeah.
It can simply
Yeah.
be a couple of people that you
Yeah.
start by finding common interests and you go and do those
Right.
things on
Yeah.
a weekly basis or something like that. I think
Yeah.
that's a great idea.
Yeah. And it is hard, right? Especially if you're like, oh, it's hard for me to like ask. But I mean, I have to say, like, I was not one to like put myself out there prior to kids, but I was lonely too. So then it was like, all of a sudden I would like talk to whoever, right? Like at the park, like, oh, I've seen them at the park here for every time we come. Like, then you kind of just start talking and connecting, or libraries, they do story times. Like sometimes that's a good place to connect with other people in the same, situation. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, tell us more about how you support parents, how you help parents, and where people can find more about what you're doing.
yeah. So, I mean, yeah. So I'm a marriage and family therapist. I do, individual and couples therapy as well as groups. I run a free group for new parents, and it used to be local group. And then because of COVID, it went online, and I haven't been able to take it off from being online now, just because of it. What I didn't realize would happen is it would connect it out to the whole world. So we've had people from all over the world in our group, which has been amazing. And the most amazing thing, like I've had a mom from the Ukraine, I've had a mom from Italy, Canada. And the thing is that the similarities between the struggles are real. And so that's been, I mean, I think that's just unites us all, right? Like parenting can unite us. And so it's like, and then how do we support each other through all of it? So, it's been great. So I still do that once a month, which you can find if you go to my website. And, I have some courses and stuff that I do, but yeah. And then my book. So, which is coming out on Audible very soon.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the book is titled Happy with Babies. So you can get that on Amazon, hopefully soon on Audible, and visit happywithbaby.com. I believe you have a free, like 5 steps or 5 things to do to help calm yourself down.
Yeah. A 5-step challenge. Yeah. To finding your calm.
To finding your calm, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us today, Catherine. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
I did too. Thank you, Kimberly.
Here's my key takeaway from today's conversation about how to reduce overwhelm and guilt to get more self-care and ultimately be a more present and happy parent. One of the best ways that you can do this is by taking the time for yourself. A lot of moms that I talk to, they feel guilty if they aren't doing everything perfectly for their kids. And there's a lot that we could unpack and dive into there. But one of my biggest takeaways is that you don't have to do everything, and it's important to have a support system. In fact, maybe one of the underlying parts of all of this is to change the expectations that you have on yourself and how you evaluate yourself as a mom or even as a dad, and really begin to see that maybe it's not so much about having the perfect bento box lunches and the perfectly put together school uniforms and all of the things that are us as moms, we compare ourselves to other moms with. Maybe it's not about doing all of that single-handedly and not getting enough sleep and being completely stressed out and having no self-care for ourselves. Perhaps a better way to evaluate and put expectations on ourselves is, are we fully present and able to engage in a positive way with our kids? And if that means we need to delegate certain things or ask for help on certain things or just say no to certain things, then that is perfectly okay, because it's more about the emotional connection with the child than anything else. And by stepping out and creating this support system, if you don't have one, can be a great way to begin to move forward with that. Share this episode with someone who you believe needs it. And as always, we love when you leave 5-star reviews wherever you listen to this podcast. It helps us to reach even more people. Until next week, stay strong.